Home from battle as a hero. Part 1. Marcus Chen stood at the viewport of the transport ship, watching Earth grow larger as they approached. The blue marble that had once seemed so vast now appeared small and fragile after 3 years fighting across the outer rim. His reflection stared back at him, older than his 25 years suggested. The scar running from his left temple to his jaw told its own story of battles fought in the void between stars. Behind him, the other survivors of the 42nd Colonial Defense Regiment tried to find comfortable positions in the cramped passenger bay. 43 soldiers had boarded this transport. Originally, they had been part of a regiment of 800. The mathematics of war were brutal and simple. "You nervous about going home?" asked Sergeant Torres, settling into the seat beside Marcus. The older woman had lost her left arm during the siege of Proxima Station, but she claimed the mechanical replacement worked better than the original. Marcus shrugged. "Just thinking about how much has changed." Torres followed his gaze to Earth. 3 years is a long time. People move on, find new things to worry about. The war probably feels like ancient history to them now. She was right, of course. While they had been fighting the hegemony across dozens of star systems, life on Earth had continued. People had gone to work, fallen in love, raised children, complained about traffic and taxes. The war had been something that happened far away, reported on the evening news between weather forecasts and sports scores. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. The image showed a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes laughing at something outside the frame. Her name was Elena Rodriguez, and she had been a civilian contractor working on the orbital defense platforms when the war began. "Still carrying that picture around?" Torres asked, glancing at the photo. Marcus nodded. "She was the reason I volunteered for the Colonial Defense Force in the first place. Wanted to protect what mattered." Torres was quiet for a moment. "You ever hear from her during the war?" "A few messages in the first year. Then nothing. Communication got spotty once we moved beyond the inner colonies." Marcus tucked the photo away. "I'm sure she's fine. Probably married with kids by now." The transport ship shuddered slightly as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Through the speakers, the pilot announced they would be landing at Luna City Spaceport in 30 minutes. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Part of him had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. Another part dreaded it. The war against the hegemony had been unlike anything humanity had faced before. The alien coalition controlled a vast swath of the galaxy and viewed human expansion as a threat to their ancient order. When diplomatic talks failed, the hegemony had launched simultaneous attacks on 12 human colonies, killing millions of civilians in the opening hours of the conflict. Marcus remembered the day he had enlisted. The images from the destroyed colonies had been broadcast across every network. Entire cities reduced to glass, orbital habitats torn apart and left drifting in space, children's toys floating among the debris. The sight had filled him with a cold fury that sustained him through 3 years of brutal combat. The 42nd Regiment had earned its reputation during the Battle of Kepler 442b, where they had held a critical supply depot against overwhelming odds for 6 days. Marcus had personally led the defense of the eastern perimeter, coordinating artillery strikes while under constant enemy fire. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the depot still in human hands and the surrounding landscape littered with destroyed hegemony war machines. That victory had been the beginning of humanity's counteroffensive. Over the next 2 years, human forces had pushed the hegemony back system by system. The aliens had fought with sophisticated technology and ruthless efficiency, but they had underestimated human adaptability and sheer stubborn determination. The final battle had taken place in the Vega system, where the combined human fleet had cornered the hegemony's main battle group. Marcus had been part of the boarding parties that captured the hegemony flagship. The alien commander, a creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a tree, had surrendered only after its ship's power core had been set to overload. With their flagship captured and their fleet scattered, the hegemony had agreed to a ceasefire. The terms were simple. They would withdraw to their original territories and cease all expansion into human space. In return, humanity would not pursue them beyond the agreed boundaries. It was not the total victory some had hoped for, but it meant the war was over. Now Marcus was coming home to a world that had changed in ways he could not imagine. The transport pilot announced their descent to Luna City, and Marcus could see the familiar landmarks of Earth's first major off-world settlement spreading below them. The city had grown significantly since he had last seen it, with new residential domes and industrial complexes stretching toward the horizon. "Look at that," Torres said, pressing her face to the viewport. "They built a whole new district while we were gone." Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on the crowd gathering at the spaceport. Even from this altitude, he could see hundreds of people waiting behind security barriers. Families holding signs, news crews setting up cameras, officials in dress uniforms preparing to give speeches. The transport touched down with barely a bump, the pilot's skill evident in the smooth landing. Around the passenger bay, soldiers began checking their uniforms and gathering their few personal possessions. Most of them had lost everything they owned during the war and would be going home with little more than the clothes on their backs and their military service. "Records, attention passengers," the pilot announced. "Welcome to Luna City Spaceport. Local time is 13:47 hours. Please remain seated until the airlock cycle is complete and ground crew gives the all clear." Marcus felt his heart racing as he heard the sounds of the docking procedure beginning. Somewhere beyond the airlock, Elena might be waiting for him, or she might not. 3 years was a long time, and he had no right to expect her to wait for a soldier who might never come home. The airlock finished cycling, and the passenger bay door slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond it lay Earth, home, and whatever future awaited them all. Home from Battle as a Hero, Part 2. The crowd erupted in cheers as the first soldiers emerged from the transport. Marcus hung back, letting others go first, watching as families reunited with tears and desperate embraces. A young private named Collins ran straight into the arms of a woman holding a toddler who had never seen his father before. An older soldier collapsed to his knees as his elderly parents reached him, all three of them sobbing. Torres nudged Marcus forward. "Come on, war hero. Time to face the music." Marcus stepped through the airlock and was immediately hit by the familiar sensation of Earth gravity and recycled station air. The noise was overwhelming after years of military discipline and the quiet of deep space. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and somewhere a band was playing patriotic music badly. He scanned the crowd, looking for a familiar face among the hundreds of strangers. His parents had died in a transport accident when he was 19, and he had no siblings. The only person he truly hoped to see was Elena, but as minutes passed without any sign of her, his heart began to sink. "Sergeant Chen," a reporter pushed through the crowd, microphone extended. "Sarah Martinez, Solar News Network. How does it feel to be home after 3 years of fighting the hegemony?" Marcus blinked in the harsh lights of the camera crew. "It feels different than I expected. You're one of the heroes of the Battle of Kepler 442b. Can you tell our viewers what it was like to hold that depot against impossible odds?" The reporter's enthusiasm felt jarring after the quiet grief of losing so many friends. Marcus had watched good people die for strategic objectives that reduced down to map coordinates and supply calculations. The heroic narrative felt hollow compared to the reality of Torres dragging wounded soldiers to safety, while enemy artillery pounded their positions. "We did our job," Marcus said simply. "A lot of good soldiers didn't make it home." The reporter seemed disappointed by his lack of enthusiasm, but before she could ask another question, a commotion near the security barrier caught Marcus's attention. A small group of protesters had gathered, holding signs that read, "Remember the colonies and justice for Kepler Prime." An older man broke through the security line and approached Marcus directly. His face was haggard, his clothes disheveled, and his eyes held a wild intensity that made Marcus instinctively step back. "You're one of them, aren't you?" the man said, his voice shaking with emotion. "One of the heroes who fought the glorious war?" "Sir, I think you should," Marcus began, but the man cut him off. "My daughter was on Kepler Prime when the hegemony attacked. 16 years old, working in the agricultural domes to save money for college." The man's voice broke. "They left nothing. Nothing but glass and radiation, and you people made peace with the monsters who killed her." Security personnel were moving toward them, but the man continued talking, tears streaming down his face. "The government tells us it's over, that we won. But the hegemony is still out there, still alive, still free. How is that victory?" Marcus felt the familiar weight of survivor's guilt settling on his shoulders. He had asked himself the same questions during the long journey home. The ceasefire had saved human lives, but it also meant the hegemony would never face true justice for the atrocities they had committed. "I'm sorry for your loss," Marcus said quietly. "We all lost people we cared about," the man laughed bitterly. "Lost people? You lost soldiers who chose to fight. I lost my little girl who was growing vegetables in a dome 1,000 light years from Earth." Security guards gently but firmly led the man away, but his words continued to echo in Marcus's mind. The crowd began to disperse as the initial excitement of the homecoming wore off. Families left with their returned soldiers, reporters packed up their equipment, and the protesters were escorted to a designated area where they could continue their demonstration without disrupting the proceedings. Marcus found himself standing alone near the transport, watching the maintenance crews prepare the ship for its next journey. Torres approached carrying a small duffel bag that contained everything she owned. "You okay?" she asked. Marcus shrugged. "That man wasn't wrong. We did make peace with murderers." "We ended a war that would have killed millions more people," Torres replied. "Sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones." A young woman approached them hesitantly. She had short brown hair and wore a civilian contractor's uniform. Marcus's heart jumped for a moment, thinking it might be Elena, but as she drew closer, he realized she was a stranger. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Sergeant Marcus Chen?" Marcus nodded. "That's me." The woman smiled nervously. "My name is Lisa Park. I work for the Colonial Administration. I have a message for you from Elena Rodriguez." Marcus felt his world shift. "Elena, is she? Where is she?" Lisa's smile faded. "She's not on Luna City right now. She wanted me to give you this." She handed Marcus a sealed envelope. "She also wanted me to tell you that she's proud of what you did out there." Marcus took the envelope with trembling hands. Elena's name was written on it in her familiar handwriting. He wanted to tear it open immediately, but something in Lisa's expression warned him to wait. "Where is she?" he asked again. Lisa looked uncomfortable. "She's working on a project in the Jupiter system. Very classified stuff. She couldn't get leave to be here today, but she wanted you to know she was thinking about you." Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He carefully tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket next to the photograph. Whatever Elena had written, he would read it when he was alone. "There's something else," Lisa continued. "The Colonial Administration has been following your service record. They have a job offer for you, if you're interested. Advisory position with the new Outer Rim Security Force. Good pay. Important work." Marcus looked around the spaceport, taking in the bustling crowds and the normalcy of civilian life. After 3 years of military discipline and constant danger, the idea of a desk job felt both appealing and terrifying. "I'll need some time to think about it," he said. Lisa nodded and handed him a small card. "Take all the time you need. When you're ready, just call that number." She walked away, leaving Marcus and Torres standing in the gradually emptying spaceport. The maintenance crews had finished their work, and the transport was preparing to depart for its next destination. Soon the only evidence of their homecoming would be a few news reports and some family photographs. "So what now?" Torres asked. Marcus looked at the envelope in his hand, then at the crowds of people going about their daily lives, oblivious to the weight of the choices that had brought peace to their world. "Now we figure out how to live with what we've done," he said. Home from battle as a hero. Part 3. Marcus found himself in a small apartment in Luna City's veteran housing complex 3 days later. The space was clean and functional, with basic furniture and a window that looked out over the city's main commercial district. It was the first time in 3 years he had been truly alone, and the silence felt oppressive. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed holding Elena's letter. He had carried it around for 3 days without opening it, afraid of what it might contain. Finally, with shaking hands, he broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper. "Dear Marcus," it began in Elena's careful handwriting, "I hope this letter finds you safe and whole. I've followed the news reports of your battles, and I'm so proud of what you and your unit accomplished. You saved countless lives." Marcus paused, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. He continued reading. "I wish I could have been there to welcome you home, but my work keeps me away from Earth for now. I want you to know that I thought about you every day during the war. Your courage and dedication inspired me to take on work that I hope will make a difference in the years to come." The next paragraph made Marcus's heart sink. "I need to be honest with you about something. During the second year of the war, I met someone. His name is David. And he's also working on the Jupiter project. We've become very close, and I think you deserve to know that before we see each other again. I never meant for this to happen, but 3 years is a long time, and we both changed. Marcus set the letter down and stared out the window. He had known this was possible, even likely. Elena had never made any promises to wait for him, and he had no right to expect her to put her life on hold for a soldier who might never return. Still, the knowledge felt like a physical blow. He forced himself to finish reading. I know this isn't what you hope to hear, and I'm sorry for any pain it causes. You will always be important to me, Marcus. What we had was real and meaningful, and it helped shape who I am today. I hope we can still be friends when you're ready. The letter was signed simply Elena, with a small heart drawn next to her name. Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it on the bedside table. He understood why she had not been at the spaceport. Facing him in person would have been too difficult for both of them. This way he could process the news privately and decide how to respond. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus opened it to find Torres standing in the hallway, wearing civilian clothes that looked strange after years of seeing her in military fatigues. "How are you holding up?" she asked, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Marcus gestured to the letter. "Elena's moved on. She's with someone else now." Torres nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry. That has to hurt." "I can't blame her," Marcus said. 3 years is a long time. People change, situations change. Torres studied his face. "But it still hurts." "Yeah, it still hurts." Torres settled into the apartment's single chair. "I got a call from the Colonial Administration today. They're being very persistent about this job offer. Apparently they really want you specifically." Marcus had been avoiding their calls for 3 days. The idea of jumping immediately back into military work felt overwhelming. He needed time to process everything that had happened, to figure out who he was now that the war was over. "What did you tell them?" "That you were considering your options." "But Marcus, you should know what they're really offering. It's not just an advisory position. They want you to help train the new Outer Rim Security Force. Specifically, they want you to develop tactics for fighting the hegemony if the ceasefire breaks down." Marcus looked up sharply. "The ceasefire is supposed to be permanent." Torres laughed without humor. "Come on, you know better than that. The hegemony agreed to stop fighting because they were losing, not because they suddenly developed a conscience. They're probably regrouping and rebuilding as we speak." Marcus had suspected as much, but hearing it stated so bluntly was still unsettling. The war might be over for now, but it was not truly finished. Somewhere in the galaxy, alien commanders were analyzing human tactics and developing countermeasures. The peace they had won might be nothing more than a temporary reprieve. "There's something else you should know," Torres continued. "That protester at the spaceport, the one who lost his daughter on Kepler Prime? His name is Robert Martinez. He's been leading a movement calling for the war to continue until the hegemony is completely destroyed." Marcus frowned. "Martinez?" "The reporter who interviewed me was named Martinez, too. His other daughter, Sarah Martinez from Solar News Network. The family has been very vocal about their opposition to the ceasefire. They've been organizing rallies and lobbying government officials to restart the war." The complexity of the situation was becoming clearer to Marcus. The war had ended, but the political and emotional aftermath was just beginning. Families like the Martinezes would never accept peace while their loved ones' killers remained unpunished. Others would oppose any action that might restart the conflict and cost more lives. "What do you think I should do?" Marcus asked. Torres was quiet for a moment. "I think you should consider that your war might not be over. The hegemony is still out there, and they're still a threat. The skills and experience you gained fighting them could save a lot of lives if the fighting starts again." Marcus walked to the window and looked out at the busy streets below. People were going about their daily lives, buying groceries, meeting friends, falling in love. They were living the peaceful existence he had fought to protect. The idea of preparing for another war felt like a betrayal of that peace. But Torres was right about the hegemony. The aliens had not surrendered because they had become peaceful. They had stopped fighting because continuing would have meant their destruction. Given time to recover and regroup, they might well try again. "The job comes with significant authority," Torres added. "You would have input on policy decisions, not just tactical training. You could help shape how humanity prepares for future threats." Marcus thought about Elena's letter, about her work on some classified project in the Jupiter system. He wondered if her research was related to the same concerns that had prompted the colonial administration to create the Outer Rim Security Force. Perhaps she was already preparing for the possibility that the war would resume. "I need more time to think," Marcus said. Finally, Torres nodded and stood to leave. "Take the time you need, but don't take too long. The galaxy isn't going to wait for us to figure out what we want to do next." After she left, Marcus returned to the window. The sun was setting over Luna City, casting long shadows across the urban landscape. In a few hours, Earth would rise above the horizon, a blue marble hanging in the black sky like a promise of home. Marcus picked up Elena's letter and read it again. She had written about courage and dedication, about work that would make a difference in the years to come. Perhaps she understood better than he did that the war was not truly over, that the peace they had won was fragile and needed to be protected. He thought about the protesters at the spaceport, about families who would never accept the deaths of their loved ones without justice. He thought about alien commanders planning their next move in the darkness between stars. Most of all, he thought about the young soldiers who would inevitably be called upon to fight the next war, and what he might be able to teach them about survival. Marcus reached for the communication panel on his desk and entered the number Lisa Park had given him. It was time to find out exactly what the colonial administration had in mind. Home from Battle as a Hero, Part 4, the Colonial Administration Building in Luna City's government district, was the imposing structure of steel and glass that stretched toward the dome covering the city. Marcus had been inside military command centers and alien battleships, but something about the sterile corporate environment made him more nervous than any combat situation. Lisa Park met him in the lobby. Looking much more professional in her business suit than she had at the spaceport, she led him through a maze of corridors to a conference room where 3 people waited around a polished table. "Sergeant Chen," said the woman at the head of the table, standing to shake his hand. "I'm Director Helen Vasquez, head of the Outer Rim Security Division. Thank you for coming." The other 2 introduced themselves as Admiral James Wright, recently retired from the Colonial Navy, and Dr. Elizabeth Foster, a specialist in xenobiology and hegemony technology. Marcus took the offered seat, feeling underdressed in his simple civilian clothes. "Before we begin," Director Vasquez said, "I need to stress that everything discussed in this room is classified at the highest levels. The public believes the war is over, and for now we want them to continue believing that." Marcus nodded. "Torres mentioned that you're concerned about the ceasefire holding." Admiral Wright leaned forward. "Concerned is putting it mildly. Our intelligence indicates that the hegemony is using the ceasefire to consolidate their remaining forces and develop new weapons. They're also actively recruiting new species to join their coalition." Dr. Foster activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red areas marked hegemony territory, blue showed human space, and yellow indicated neutral zones. In the past 6 months, 3 previously neutral species have announced they're joining the hegemony. That's not the behavior of a coalition that's accepted defeat. Marcus studied the display. The hegemony controlled a vast swath of the galaxy, far larger than human space. Even after their military defeats, they remained a formidable force. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Marcus asked. Director Vasquez smiled. "We want you to help us prepare for the next war. Not if it comes, but when it comes. Your experience fighting the hegemony is invaluable, and your tactical innovations at Kepler 442b have become standard doctrine across the Colonial Defense Force. The Outer Rim Security Force will be an elite unit," Admiral Wright added. "Smaller than the regular military, but more specialized and better equipped. Think of them as humanity's rapid response team for alien threats." Marcus felt a familiar sense of unease. "How is this different from just rebuilding the military? And how do you justify it to the families who lost people in the war?" Dr. Foster and Admiral Wright exchanged glances. Director Vasquez answered carefully. "The official position is that we're creating a peacekeeping force to patrol the border regions and ensure the ceasefire is maintained. The public doesn't need to know about our more aggressive preparations." Marcus didn't like the sound of that. "You're lying to them about preparing for another war?" "We're protecting them from unnecessary panic," Director Vasquez corrected. "The Martinez family and their supporters want to restart the war immediately. Others want complete disarmament. Neither extreme serves humanity's interests. We need to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." The conversation was interrupted by a chime from the communication system. Lisa Park's voice came through the speakers. Director Vasquez, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have an urgent priority message from the Jupiter Research Facility. Put it through, Vasquez said. The holographic display shifted to show a communication link. After a moment, a young woman's face appeared. Marcus felt his heart skip as he recognized Elena, even though she looked tired and stressed. Director Vasquez, Elena said, we have a situation out here. One of our deep space monitoring stations has detected hegemony ships moving through the neutral zone toward human space. At least a dozen vessels, including what appears to be a new class of battleship we haven't seen before. The room fell silent. Admiral Wright leaned forward. How far from the nearest human colony? Approximately 6 days at standard travel speed, Elena replied. But Director, these ships aren't heading for any of our colonies. Their trajectory suggests they're making for the Kepler system. Marcus felt cold. The Kepler system was where the worst battles of the war had been fought. It was also where millions of human civilians had been murdered in the opening attacks. Are they violating the ceasefire? Dr. Foster asked. Elena shook her head. Technically, no. The Kepler system was designated as neutral territory under the ceasefire agreement. But there's nothing there except wreckage and memorial satellites. Director Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Thank you for the report, Dr. Rodriguez. Continue monitoring and report any changes in their course or behavior. Understood, Elena said. The communication ended and her image disappeared from the display. Marcus realized that everyone in the room was looking at him. You want my answer now, he said. The hegemony is making a move, Admiral Wright said. We need to be ready to respond. Your expertise could be crucial in the next few hours or days. Marcus thought about Elena's words, about hegemony ships heading toward the site of humanity's greatest tragedy. He thought about the families of the dead, who would see this as a desecration of their loved ones' graves. He thought about the protesters who wanted justice and the politicians who wanted peace. What authority would I have? He asked. Director Vasquez smiled. Significant authority. You would be the senior tactical advisor for the Outer Rim Security Force, with direct input on deployment decisions and strategic planning. When the security force deploys, you would be in operational command. And if I recommend actions that the government doesn't want to take, that would depend on the circumstances, Vasquez said carefully. But your recommendations would carry considerable weight. Marcus stood and walked to the window overlooking Luna City. Below, people were going about their daily lives, unaware that alien warships were moving through space toward a graveyard of human hopes and dreams. They deserved to live in peace, but peace required strength to maintain it. I'll take the job, Marcus said finally. But I have conditions. Name them, Director Vasquez said. First, no lies to the public about what we're doing. If we're preparing for war, we tell them we're preparing for war. Second, I want Torres as my second in command. Third, I want regular intelligence briefings on hegemony activities, not just summaries. Director Vasquez nodded, agreed on all points. When can you start? Marcus looked at the holographic display still showing hegemony ships moving through space. How soon can you get me to the Jupiter Research Facility? Admiral Wright smiled grimly. There's a fast courier ship leaving in 2 hours. You could be there in 3 days. Marcus thought about Elena's face on the communication screen, tired but determined. Whatever she was working on in the Jupiter system, it was important enough to keep her away from Earth during the homecoming ceremonies. Perhaps it was time he found out exactly what humanity was preparing for in the cold darkness between stars. Then I guess I'm going to Jupiter, Marcus said. Home from Battle as a Hero, Part 5. The Jupiter Research Facility was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the Trojan Belt, invisible to casual observation and heavily defended by automated weapon platforms. Marcus's courier ship was challenged 3 times during the approach, and he was required to provide biometric identification before being allowed to dock. Elena was waiting for him at the airlock, looking older than he remembered but still beautiful. The 3 years had changed her, adding lines around her eyes and a gravity to her bearing that spoke of important responsibilities. She wore a white lab coat over practical work clothes, and her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. Marcus, she said quietly, stepping forward to embrace him briefly. The hug was warm but careful, the gesture of an old friend rather than a former lover. I'm glad you made it safely. Elena. Marcus found himself struggling for words. Seeing her in person made the reality of her letter more concrete. I got your message. Thank you for being honest. She nodded, looking relieved that he was taking it well. I was afraid you might be angry. I was hurt, Marcus admitted. But I understand. 3 years is a long time, and you had no reason to wait for someone who might never come home. They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, before Elena gestured down the corridor. Come on, I'll show you what we've been working on. It's why Director Vasquez wanted you here. The facility was larger than Marcus had expected, with multiple levels carved into the asteroid's interior. Elena led him through laboratories filled with equipment he didn't recognize, past workshops where technicians assembled complex devices, and through data centers humming with quantum processors. This is Project Prometheus, Elena explained as they walked. Officially, we're researching hegemony technology to improve our defensive capabilities. Unofficially, we're developing weapons and tactics for the next phase of the war. They entered a large chamber where the centerpiece was a partially assembled device the size of a small building. It looked like a fusion of human engineering and alien technology, with organic curves integrated into geometric structures. What is it? Marcus asked. A hybrid weapons platform, Elena said. We've been reverse engineering captured hegemony technology and adapting it for human use. This particular device combines their energy projection systems with our targeting and control software. Marcus walked around the device, studying its construction. How powerful is it? Powerful enough to destroy a hegemony battleship with a single shot, Elena said quietly. Or level a city from orbit. The implications were staggering. Marcus had fought the hegemony with conventional weapons, relying on tactics and courage to overcome their technological advantages. This device represented a fundamental shift in the balance of power. How many of these have you built? This is the prototype. We have plans for 12 more, but construction depends on political approval and resource allocation. Elena gestured to other areas of the chamber where similar devices were in various stages of assembly. We've also developed smaller weapon systems and defensive technologies. A man approached them from across the chamber. He was tall and lean, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Marcus recognized him immediately from Elena's description as David, her new partner. The man extended his hand with a genuine smile. You must be Marcus Chen, David said. I'm David Morrison, project coordinator for the Weapons Development Division. Elena's told me a lot about you. Marcus shook the offered hand, studying David's face for any sign of hostility or awkwardness. He found none. David seemed genuinely pleased to meet him, which somehow made the situation more difficult rather than easier. Elena says you've been working on hegemony technology, Marcus said. David nodded enthusiastically. 3 years of it. The amount we've learned is incredible. Their approach to energy manipulation is centuries ahead of ours, but their computing systems are actually quite primitive compared to human technology. By combining the best of both, we've created weapons that neither species could have developed alone. Elena activated a holographic display that showed technical specifications for various devices. The hybrid weapons platform you saw is our biggest project. But we've also developed personal weapons, ship-mounted systems, and defensive screens that can deflect hegemony energy attacks. Marcus studied the display, trying to process the implications. Does the government know about all this? Some of it, Elena said carefully. Director Vasquez and the colonial administration know about the weapons development. The military leadership knows about the defensive technologies, but the full scope of what we're capable of is known only to a few people. Including the ability to destroy planets? Marcus asked. David's smile faded. That's not the intended purpose of these weapons. But it's possible, Marcus pressed. Elena and David exchanged glances. Elena answered reluctantly. Yes, it's possible. The larger hybrid platforms could theoretically be used to destroy planetary surfaces, but that's not why we built them. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the asteroid's recycled atmosphere. Humanity had always prided itself on fighting defensively, protecting colonies and civilians rather than seeking conquest. These weapons changed everything. They gave humanity the power to become the aggressor, to do to alien worlds what the hegemony had done to human colonies. Show me the intelligence data on those hegemony ships, Marcus said. Elena led him to a different section of the facility where banks of monitors displayed real-time data from deep space sensors. The hegemony fleet was clearly visible, 12 ships moving in formation toward the Kepler system. The lead vessel was indeed a new design, larger and more heavily armed than anything they had encountered during the war. "They're not trying to hide," Marcus observed. "This is meant to be seen." "That's what we think too," Elena said. "The question is why. What are they trying to accomplish by visiting a dead system?" Marcus studied the ship configurations and movement patterns. After 3 years of fighting the hegemony, he had developed an intuitive understanding of their tactics. "They're testing us. They want to see how we respond to their presence near human territory." David pulled up additional data on the screens. "Our long-range sensors show increased activity in hegemony space as well. Ship movements, communications traffic, construction projects. They're definitely preparing for something." "War," Marcus said simply. "They're preparing for war." Elena looked troubled. "The ceasefire agreement specifically allows for scientific expeditions and memorial visits to neutral territories. Technically, they're not violating any terms, but they're pushing the boundaries to see how far they can go," Marcus added. "Classic probing behavior. They're testing our resolve and our response capabilities." A new voice interrupted their conversation. "Then perhaps it's time we gave them something to test." Marcus turned to see a woman in a colonial Navy uniform approaching. She was middle-aged, with graying hair and the confident bearing of a senior officer. Marcus recognized her from intelligence briefings as Admiral Sarah Chen, no relation despite the shared surname. "Admiral," Elena said, standing straighter. "I didn't know you were coming." "Emergency briefing from Earth," Admiral Chen said. "The situation has escalated. 2 hours ago, the hegemony fleet changed course. They're no longer heading for the Kepler system." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Where are they going?" Admiral Chen activated the main display, showing an updated tactical map. The hegemony ships had indeed changed direction, now heading toward a different system entirely. Marcus recognized the designation immediately. "New Geneva," he said quietly. "They're heading for New Geneva." New Geneva was one of humanity's newest colonies, established just before the war began. It had a population of nearly 2 million people, mostly families who had left Earth seeking new opportunities among the stars. The colony had been far from the main battle zones and had survived the war untouched. "The colony has minimal defenses," Admiral Chen continued. "A few patrol ships and orbital platforms, nothing that could stop a hegemony battle group. At their current speed, they'll reach New Geneva in 4 days." Elena looked stricken. "Are they really going to attack? That would shatter the ceasefire completely." "We don't know," Admiral Chen said, "but we can't afford to wait and find out. The Colonial Defense Force is mobilizing, but our nearest fleet units are 6 days away from New Geneva. By the time they arrive, it could be too late." Marcus studied the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. "What about the hybrid weapons? Could they reach the hegemony fleet?" David shook his head. "The prototype isn't mobile. It would take weeks to install it on a ship platform, assuming we could find a vessel large enough to carry it." "But you have smaller weapons," Marcus said. "Ship-mounted systems, personal devices. What about those?" Elena hesitated. "Some of them are ready for field testing, but they haven't been fully proven. Using them in combat would be a significant risk." Admiral Chen stepped forward. "Sergeant Chen, you're now the senior tactical advisor for the Outer Rim Security Force. In that capacity, what's your recommendation?" Marcus looked at the display showing hegemony ships moving toward an innocent colony. He thought, "Home from battle as a hero. Part 6, the hybrid weapon systems were loaded onto 3 ships within the promised 6 hours." Marcus stood in the hangar bay watching the final preparations, marveling at the efficiency of Elena's team. The weapons looked deceptively simple, sleek cylinders that could be mounted on existing ship weapon points. But he knew they contained technology that could change the course of human history. Elena approached him, carrying a small device that looked like a modified sidearm. "Personal protection," she said, offering him the weapon. "It uses the same energy projection principles as the ship-mounted systems, just scaled down." Marcus took the weapon, noting its unfamiliar weight and balance. "How much power does it have?" "Enough to punch through hegemony personal armor," Elena said. "But Marcus, be careful with it. The energy output is completely different from conventional weapons. It could accidentally damage ship systems or hull plating if you're not careful." He holstered the weapon and turned to watch the loading operations. Torres had arrived from Luna City and was directing the installation of the hybrid weapons on the lead ship, a modified destroyer called the Valiant. Two smaller frigates, the Phoenix and the Determination, would carry the remaining weapons. Nervous? Elena asked quietly. Marcus considered the question. About the battle? No. About these weapons? Yes. We're crossing a line here, Elena. Once we use hegemony technology against them, we become something different than what we were. Elena was quiet for a moment. Do you remember what you told me before you left for the war? You said you were fighting to protect what mattered. These weapons are just tools, Marcus. What matters is how we use them. And if we use them to become conquerors instead of defenders, then we'll have lost more than any war could take from us, Elena said. But I don't think that will happen. Not with people like you making the decisions. Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the hangar bay. All personnel prepare for departure. Launch in T-minus 30 minutes. Marcus felt the familiar pre-battle tension settling in his stomach. It was a sensation he had hoped never to experience again. But it also brought a strange sense of purpose. This was what he was good at, what he had trained for, what the war had shaped him to be. I should go, he said to Elena. The ships are waiting. Elena stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her familiar perfume, mixed with the metallic scent of the laboratory. Marcus, I want you to know that whatever happens between us personally, I believe in what you're doing. These weapons exist because we knew this day would come. Now it's up to you to make sure they're used properly. Marcus nodded and turned to leave, but Elena caught his arm. And Marcus, be careful out there. I know we're not what we used to be, but I still care about what happens to you. He looked into her eyes and saw the same intelligence and determination that had first attracted him to her years ago, but there was something else there now. A sadness that spoke of choices made and paths taken that could not be undone. I'll be careful, he promised. Take care of yourself, Elena. The three ships launched on schedule, accelerating quickly away from the asteroid facility toward the intercept point where they would meet the hegemony fleet. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching Jupiter shrink in the rear display. Beside him, Torres was reviewing tactical data on the approaching alien ships. 12 confirmed vessels, she reported. The lead ship is definitely a new class, approximately 50% larger than the battleships we fought during the war. The others appear to be standard hegemony designs, but our sensors are detecting some anomalous energy signatures. Marcus studied the tactical display. Anomalous how? Higher power outputs than we've seen before. Different frequency patterns. It's possible they've upgraded their weapons and defensive systems during the ceasefire. The implications were troubling. If the hegemony had been developing new technology, while humanity focused on rebuilding, the hybrid weapons might not provide as much of an advantage as hoped. Time to intercept? Marcus asked. 18 hours at current acceleration, the navigation officer reported. We'll meet them approximately 6 hours before they reach New Geneva. Marcus activated the ship's communication system. All ships, this is Marcus Chen. In 18 hours, we're going to engage a hegemony battle group using weapons that have never been tested in combat. I want everyone to understand what we're risking here. If these weapons fail, we're outgunned and outnumbered. If they work too well, we might start a war that could consume the entire galaxy. He paused, looking around the bridge at the faces of his crew. Many of them were veterans of the previous war, people who had served with him during the darkest days of the conflict. Others were younger, recent graduates of the Colonial Naval Academy who had never seen combat. But if we do nothing, 2 million innocent people on New Geneva might die. The hegemony is testing us, trying to see if we still have the will to fight for what's right. Today we're going to give them their answer. Torres activated the tactical display, showing the projected intercept point. Recommendations for the engagement. Marcus studied the enemy formation. The hegemony ships were traveling in a standard battle group configuration, with the large command ship at the center and smaller vessels arranged in a protective screen. It was a formation designed to maximize firepower while protecting the most valuable vessel. We hit them fast and hard, Marcus said. The hybrid weapons should give us a significant advantage, but only if we use them before the hegemony realizes what they're facing. One concentrated attack on the command ship, then we scatter and engage targets of opportunity. And if they surrender? Torres asked. Marcus considered the question. During the previous war, hegemony forces had rarely surrendered, preferring to fight to the death rather than accept capture, but the hybrid weapons might change that calculation. We accept surrender and escort them back to hegemony space, he said. Our goal is to protect New Geneva, not to restart the war. But if they don't surrender? Marcus looked at the weapon status displays showing the hybrid systems coming online. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy multiple hegemony vessels, power that humanity had never possessed before. Then we show them why humanity survived the last war and will survive the next one, he said grimly. The next 18 hours passed slowly. Marcus found himself thinking about Elena's words, about the line they were crossing by using hegemony technology against its creators. He thought about the families on New Geneva, unaware that their fate hung in the balance of a confrontation between ancient enemies. Most of all, he thought about the soldiers under his command, people who trusted him to make the right decisions in the darkness between stars. When the proximity alarms finally sounded, Marcus was ready. The hegemony fleet appeared on the main display, 12 ships moving in perfect formation toward their destination. They had not altered course or acknowledged the human ships, maintaining the fiction that this was a peaceful mission. All ships, battle stations, Marcus commanded. This is it. Let's show them what humanity has learned. The Valiant and her sister ships accelerated toward the enemy, hybrid weapons charging, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire species into the void between worlds. Home from battle as a hero. Part 7. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Marcus watched from the bridge of the Valiant as the hybrid weapons performed beyond every expectation. The first shot from the lead human ship struck the hegemony command vessel amidships, and the massive alien battleship simply disappeared in a brilliant flash of energy. The remaining 11 ships scattered in confusion, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos. Target the cruiser on the left flank, Marcus ordered. The Valiant's hybrid weapon discharged with a sound like tearing metal, and another hegemony ship vanished from the tactical display. Across the battlefield, the Phoenix and Determination were engaging multiple targets simultaneously. The alien ships returned fire with their traditional energy weapons, but their attacks splashed harmlessly against the hybrid defensive screens that Elena's team had developed. It was not a battle so much as a demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority. Within 10 minutes, 8 hegemony ships had been destroyed. The remaining 4 vessels suddenly stopped firing and transmitted a surrender signal on standard diplomatic frequencies. Marcus had never heard a hegemony surrender before, and the alien word sounded strange coming through the translation system. "They're requesting terms," the communications officer reported. Sounding stunned, Marcus stared at the tactical display showing the 4 surviving ships. During the previous war, he had watched hegemony vessels fight to the last crew member rather than accept defeat. This surrender represented something new, a fundamental shift in the balance of power between the species. "Open a channel," Marcus said. The main screen shifted to show the interior of an alien bridge. The hegemony commander was a tall insectoid creature with multiple arms and compound eyes that reflected the bridge lighting like dark jewels. When it spoke, its voice was translated into flat, emotionless human words. "I am Fleet Commander Zekth of the Hegemony Expansion Force. I formally surrender my remaining vessels to human authority." Marcus studied the alien's face, trying to read emotions and features that evolution had never intended for human understanding. "I am Marcus Chen of the Colonial Defense Force. Why were you approaching New Geneva?" "We were conducting a reconnaissance mission to evaluate human defensive capabilities," the alien commander said without hesitation. The mission parameters did not include attacking civilian populations. Torres leaned closer to Marcus. "Do you believe him?" Marcus considered the question. The hegemony had always been direct in their communications, viewing deception as inefficient. If Fleet Commander Zekth said they were only conducting reconnaissance, it was probably true. "Commander Zekth," Marcus said, "your reconnaissance mission has been completed. You have seen human defensive capabilities. What will you report to your superiors?" The alien's compound eyes shifted, a gesture that might have indicated surprise or concern. "I will report that humanity has developed weapons technology that exceeds our current capabilities. I will recommend that the Hegemony Council reconsider our strategic assessments." "And what about the ceasefire agreement?" "The ceasefire remains in effect," Commander Zekth said. "This was not an act of war, merely an evaluation of military capabilities on both sides." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and unease. The immediate crisis was over, But the long-term implications were staggering. Humanity had just demonstrated the ability to destroy hegemony ships with ease, fundamentally altering the balance of power in the galaxy. Commander, you and your remaining ships will return to hegemony space immediately. You will not approach human colonies or territories without prior diplomatic contact. Is this understood? Understood, the alien replied. We will depart immediately. The communication ended and Marcus watched as the 4 surviving hegemony ships changed course and began accelerating away from human space. Within an hour, they had disappeared into hyperspace, carrying news of humanity's new weapons back to their masters. All ships, stand down from battle stations, Marcus ordered. Set course for New Geneva. We need to check on the colony and reassure the population that the threat has passed. Torres approached him as the crew began securing from combat operations. That was almost too easy, she said quietly. I expected them to fight harder. Marcus nodded. The hybrid weapons worked better than anyone predicted. But Torres, I'm not sure that's entirely a good thing. What do you mean? Marcus gestured to the tactical display still showing the debris fields where 8 hegemony ships had been destroyed. Look at what we just did. We annihilated 2/3 of their fleet in minutes. That's not defense, that's dominance. And dominance has a way of corrupting the people who possess it. The journey to New Geneva took 6 hours. When they arrived, Marcus was relieved to find the colony intact and unaware that they had ever been in danger. The local government was notified of the situation through diplomatic channels. But the general population continued their daily lives without knowing how close they had come to disaster. Marcus stood in his quarters aboard the Valiant, looking out at the peaceful lights of New Geneva's cities spread across the planet's surface. In his hand, he held a message from Director Vasquez congratulating him on the mission's success and informing him that production of hybrid weapons would be accelerated based on their combat performance. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Elena entered, looking tired but pleased. She had traveled to New Geneva aboard a diplomatic transport to debrief the weapons performance and collect tactical data. The hybrid systems exceeded all specifications, she reported. Dr. Morrison is already working on improvements based on the combat data. The next generation should be even more effective. Marcus set down the message and turned to face her. Elena, what have we created? She frowned. I don't understand. Those weapons don't just level the playing field with the hegemony. They make us superior to them. Completely superior. We just demonstrated that we can destroy their ships without taking any casualties ourselves. Elena was quiet for a moment. Isn't that good? Doesn't that mean we can protect our colonies more effectively? Marcus walked to the window overlooking New Geneva. It means we can protect our colonies, yes, but it also means we can attack theirs. Helena, we've just given humanity the power to become everything we fought against. Or we've given humanity the power to ensure that wars like the last one never happen again. Elena countered. The hegemony respected only strength. Now they know we have strength that exceeds their own. Marcus considered her words. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps overwhelming superiority would lead to lasting peace rather than human aggression. But history suggested otherwise. Powerful species had a tendency to use their power, regardless of their original intentions. There's something else, Elena said quietly. David and I have been talking. About the future. We've decided to request transfers back to Earth. We want to start a family, and the Jupiter facility isn't the right place for children. Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions. Part of him was happy for Elena, that she had found love and purpose in her new life. Another part mourned the final ending of what they had once shared. I'm glad for you, he said, and meant it. You deserve happiness. Elena stepped closer. What about you, Marcus? What will you do now? Marcus looked out at New Geneva, then at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was analyzing the battle data and deciding how to respond to humanity's new capabilities. Other alien species were probably doing the same calculations, wondering if they needed to align themselves with or against the suddenly powerful humans. I'll do what I've always done, Marcus said. Protect what matters, even if that means protecting it from ourselves. Elena nodded, understanding. The girl they'll remember isn't me, is it? It's the idea of who we used to be before the war changed everything. Marcus looked at her, seeing not just the woman she had become but the young contractor he had fallen in love with years ago. Maybe, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes the memory of who we were is the only thing that keeps us from becoming something we shouldn't be. Elena smiled sadly and kissed his cheek. Take care of yourself, Marcus. The galaxy is going to need people like you in the years to come. After she left, Marcus remained at the window, watching the lights of human civilization spread across an alien world. He thought about the hybrid weapons, about the power they represented, and about the responsibility that came with such capabilities. He thought about Elena and the life she was building, about the families on New Geneva, who slept peacefully because of decisions made in the darkness between stars. Most of all, he thought about the future and the choices that lay ahead for a species that had just discovered it was no longer the underdog in a hostile galaxy. The war against the hegemony was truly over now, ended not by negotiation, but by the simple fact that humanity had become too powerful to be threatened. But as Marcus had learned during 3 years of combat, every ending was also a beginning. And humanity's new beginning would be far more dangerous than anything they had faced before. Outside his window, the stars waited, beautiful and cold and full of possibilities both wonderful and terrible.